I'm presuming there are a couple of ladies there. I presume there are a couple of ladies that are there, but in the absence of ladies, I also want to thank everybody for joining this discussion. When Ogasami invited me to speak, I first was taken by surprise, but then I realized that it's very important that we learn from each other. I always take every opportunity to learn something. So I want this forum to be approached as if I'm learning from you guys and you guys are learning from me, because when we share information, we enrich each other. Um, I choose to speak on defamation and journalism because of the prevailing environment we live in. Information dissemination is essentially what journalism is about. Journalism covers information, it covers entertainment, it covers education. And I will take it further to say it also covers ethical responsibility. There has to be responsibility in what you as a journalist will be reporting to your audience. Now, who is your audience? Your audience is primarily, at this point, the Nigerian market, but then it's also potentially the international market and the global market, because the world today is literally a village. Why I'm zoning into saying that the world is a village is because the internet has reduced all of us to become one community, where if you put out information, unlike 15, 20 years ago, where if all you did was put out information, say in a newspaper, like the Nigerian Tide, the Daily Times, the Punch, or Vanguard, they to be restricted to wherever the vendor will be able to deliver that paper, or wherever any office subscribes to the newspaper. But today, when you put something out, especially on the internet or on a web page or on your own account page, whether it's Facebook, whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's Twitter, it can go beyond wherever you think it will go to. Now, the impact of that is that it increases the level of responsibility, and it also increases the need for self-censorship, because when you say or put out something, it does not end within that immediate zone. It can go as far as Alaska or Russia. So anybody with data in your village can see what you put out there. The same way your cousin living in New York, USA, will see the same thing. That is why I pointed out the issue of defamation, because today we realize there's an active community called bloggers. Now, bloggers are those that go out and put out information. Most of them do not have any formal journalism education or training, like you guys are having now under the auspices of Ogasami and his news media organization. Unfortunately, we have a lot of undisciplined people out there who put out things without realizing that there are far-reaching legal implications when you publish something, especially if that thing or that information is false. Now, going to defamation, especially in Nigeria, Section 375 of the Criminal Code Act of Nigeria, the same thing is Section 391 of the Nigerian Penal Code. For those of you who don't know, the Nigerian Criminal Administration It's actually divided into two sections, and it's due to our history. Nigeria originally had the Southern and Northern Protectorate before Nigeria became independent in 1960. So the North was administered separately and operated the penal code. The South operated the criminal code, and that distinction still remains, even though there's a lot of uniformity now in so many areas. But for the northern states, they're covered by the penal code. For the southern states, they're covered by the criminal code. So Section 375 of the criminal code and Section 391 of the penal code both indicate that any person who publishes any defamatory matter is guilty of a misdemeanor and is subject to an imprisonment for 1 year. That may take you by surprise because a lot of people do not know that such a law even exists, where if you write something false about somebody, you could get arrested and you could get imprisoned for 1 year. Now, you ask, what is a defamatory matter? What is defamation? Defamation is a matter that's likely to injure a person by exposing him to shame or ridicule, or likely to damage any person in his profession or trade, or generally damages his reputation. So it's important to, make sure that when you are writing something, you can verify it, you can defend it, you can stand by it. Otherwise, you put yourself in a situation where the police can actually arrest you on grounds of a defamation under the criminal code or the Nigerian penal code. Though legal experts believe, and it is true in the Western world, that defamation is actually a civil offense, not a criminal offense. The Nigerian situation, the legal development is kind of slow. So we've not evolved to where it's strictly a civil offense. For those of you that follow societal development in Nigeria, I would like to illustrate with a recent development. I think it happened either last year. If you people remember the popular billionaire Ned Nwoko, the one that got married to the young Nollywood actress, a certain lady that sells or promotes natural or herbal sexual supplements by name Jaruma had indicated that she was responsible for the young Nollywood actress getting married to Ned Nwoko, and that she was even owed 10 million naira by the young actress, who I believe her name is Regina Daniels, because Regina Daniels had promised to promote Jaruma's products on the internet. And 10 million was the agreed amount for which Jaruma says she had paid. But Ned Nwoko felt that he had been defamed because he did not believe that he got married to his wife because of any Jaruma product, or that the wife maintained him because of any Jaruma product. But instead of Ned Nwoko to file a civil claim, he instead reported the matter to the police, and the police in Abuja proceeded to arrest the Jaruma lady. There was a lot of going back and forth. She was detained for some days, I believe, before she was released on bail. And as at this time that we're speaking, her matter is still in the Chief Magistrate Court. So I just want to illustrate the delicate situation in Nigeria, where because the law is still regarding defamation as a criminal act, it endangers anybody out there, including journalists, who may publish something and find themselves in a difficult situation to extricate themselves from that legal problem. An illustration of a defamatory statement is for you to publish and say, Governor Wike stole 1 billion naira. Now, you cannot put something like that out there if you don't have the facts to back it up. If you do, Governor Wike has been defamed by the definition of defamation we stated earlier. And Wike can take advantage of the fact that it's a criminal act, or he can sue the journalist and the organization the journalist is working for. And that brings me to the issue of publication, because that's an important element of defamation. Now, defamation covers several acts, which basically must occur before defamation is regarded as defamation. There are certain elements that must exist for defamation to occur. One, that the person made a statement of fact, and that person published the statement. What is publication in the Nigerian context? In the Supreme Court case of Nsirim against Nsirim, it's a 1990 case. Justice Obaseki noted that publication means the making of a known defamatory statement to some other person to whom it is written or directed. Now, the third clause there is that the statement must cause an injury. So when you make that statement, you publish it, it must cause an injury to the person. Injury, in this case, means that it affects that person negatively, to the point where maybe it will cost that person a job, it will cost that person a contract, it will cost that person simply disregard by his immediate community. For example, if you accuse Wike of stealing 1 billion naira, the average River State resident will not perceive Wike as an inspirational leader. He will perceive Wike as a thief. So whenever he appears in public, he could even be booed, because the average market woman or student or farmer or civil servant believes that Wike stole 1 billion naira of public money. The fourth clause here is that the statement must be false. So when you publish that statement, you know within yourself that it is incorrect, but you're putting it out there most likely just for it to be sensational. And that brings me back to the unprofessionalism of many bloggers who they want to direct traffic to their page, they don't verify information, they just put it out there because they heard it from a third-hand source. That falsity is an important part, an important element. Then the next and last clause is that the statement is not privileged. Now, I'm going to direct that again when we're talking about defenses, because in as much as you have the crime or thought of defamation, there are also defenses available. And one of the defenses is that the statement is privileged. Now, for a statement to be privileged, in the sense like a journalist is supposed to have some kind of coverage when he's doing his job honestly and diligently. Usually, if you make a statement, you must be able to defend it. In journalism, there is what is called protection of sources. Now, that is enshrined or founded in the fact that for a journalist to be able to work effectively, they do not have to disclose the sources of their information so as to preserve neutrality, and also most of the time also to preserve the safety of their sources. So take, for example, we go back to the Governor Wike example. If you as a journalist are convinced that that statement is correct, and say you got that information from the personal assistant to Wike, who sees him every day, who works with him, who puts out his clothes, puts out his toothbrush, makes sure the food is served is correct, his breakfast, and is within 24/7. If you get information from that kind of person, that's a reliable source. But then your source deserves to be protected. So the law gives you, the journalist, the qualified privilege defense to the allegation of defamation. Now, what is qualified privilege in the context of Nigerian defamation? Qualified privilege was defined in another important Court of Appeal case, Nigerian Television Authority versus Ebenezer Babatokpe. Ebenezer Babatokpe is a former journalist and politician. And he had brought a matter, the NTA had brought a matter against him, that basically he had pleaded qualified privilege. And qualified privilege is a defense to any untrue publication. It can only be claimed when the occasion of the publication is shown to be privileged. So because in that context, Mr. Babatokpe's source had to be protected, and he gave that information in his capacity as a journalist, and he could defend it. He could then claim that defense of qualified privilege. Similarly, in another Supreme Court case, a 2005 Supreme Court case, Ilu Abachi against Ilu Abachi, the Supreme Court held that an occasion is privileged when the person who makes the documentation has a moral duty to make it, and the person who received it has an interest in hearing it. Both these conditions must exist in order that the occasion may be privileged. So a journalist in this context has a moral duty to inform the public about important information, and the public has a right to receive that information, has an interest in receiving that information. So if you as a journalist get that important and relevant information, and it is correct that Governor Wike stole 1 billion naira, of course, the Rivers State citizen, and indeed Nigerians as a whole, have the interest and the right to get that information. So because of a combination of both the moral right and the interest in receiving it, so long as both exist, it is based on fact and the information is correct, then that defense of qualified privilege will, be available to a journalist. Oh, sorry if I'm taking you back, but defamation can be broken down into two aspects. There is libel and there is slander. Now, those two words tend to be used interchangeably with defamation, but there's a slight distinction. Libel is Libel, is when you actually publish or write out any information. So when you type out something on the internet, when you type out something on a piece of paper and it ends up being printed on a newspaper or any other publication, that is libel. Now, spoken words, like if you tell your colleague something and your colleague tells his neighbor and his neighbor tells his girlfriend and his girlfriend tells his cousin, that is slander because it's verbal. Them say is slander. So slander is when it is spoken. Libel is when it is actually printed or published. Now, the main defense to defamation is justification or truth. Of course, that one is pretty obvious. If something is true, the plaintiff cannot come and claim defamation. For example, the current trending news in Nigeria is that the popular actor Yul Edochie went to marry a second wife. If you as a journalist, and in fact, Yul Edochie himself did admit to it. So if you as a journalist put out something tomorrow and say Yul Edochie got married to a second wife, and you write a story about it, Yul Edochie cannot sue you for defamation. If he does, you can plead justification or truth. And of course, the courts will not find you liable or guilty. The next defense is honest comment or fair comment. Now, honest comment or fair comment occurs where an issue is out there. Let's say there is a discussion about President Buhari. I say President Buhari recently donated $1 million to Afghanistan to help them with whatever internal issues they have. Now, as a Nigerian, you have an interest in how our money is spent. And you as a journalist can actually write out an article and make a fair comment about whether it is right or wrong for President Buhari to approve $1 million donation to Afghanistan. So when you make an honest or fair comment like that in an article, you have a defense. The next one is absolute privilege. Now, absolute privilege usually occurs especially in statutory or protected situations. A good example is your legislators in the House of Assembly, House of Representatives, Senate. On the Senate floor, on the House of Reps floor, or on the floor of the House of Assembly in Port Harcourt, or in Uyo, or in Calabar, they can say anything under the sun. So long as they're saying it in the House of Assembly, on the grounds of the House of Assembly, they have absolute immunity. You cannot sue a senator for saying that, oh, you know what, thank God's wife sleeps around. He is my constituent. I know that, but in any case, let us move on to something more important. He might have said it as a joke. He might have said it casually. He might not have meant it. You were defamed because he said something negative about your wife. But because he is saying it on the floor of the Senate, he has absolute immunity. By the same token, it also covers judges. So let's say in the High Court of Rivers State, a judge is sitting over a case and he says something to one of the witnesses that makes the witness upset. He could say, oh, you, Mr. Witness, I heard that in your community meeting, you stole 20,000 naira. I am so disappointed. Now, ordinarily, that will be defamation. But because he's saying it in his capacity as a judge and he's sitting in court, he has absolute immunity, and you cannot sue the judge. Neither can you sue your senator or your House of Assembly member if he's saying something on the floor of the senator house. Another good defense that's available is publication on a matter of public interest. Now that's exceptional because you cannot just make a negative comment like that without it being defamation. But if it's a matter of public interest, unless, the exception is unless you made it with malice, where you made it out of hate, out of dislike, or out of an intent or desire to harm the person you are referring to, or you make it with a reckless disregard for how that person will feel, then it is no longer a matter of public interest. But if you genuinely make a statement and say, look, for example, I do not understand why the federal government requires everybody to have an NIN. I don't think it is right. I think there's a problem there. I think they're trying to monitor people unnecessarily. Now, that's a publication making, because the NIN is a matter of public interest. It affects everybody, and everybody would like to hear one opinion or the other. Now, so long as you offer it with an open mind, with no ulterior motive that is negative, you can claim that defense. Now, another defense that's available for defamation is what is known in legal circles as an offer of amends. An offer of amends is almost like a defense, only the lawyer will have to offer it before the case starts. In other words, an offer of amends is where you basically are saying, you know what, I'm guilty, I'm liable. That statement I made was incorrect. Please forgive me. I'm willing to pay damages. In other words, you are admitting ahead of time that you are incorrect. You made an incorrect statement that you know defamed or damaged that individual, but you wanted to go ahead and make amends before the individual takes action or before the court action actually commences. Now, the offer of amends it's a procedure. It's not something that's usually taken quickly or randomly. It's rare, but it has occurred several times. And it basically allows the person to, admit error, offer apologies, and pay damages. Usually the court, when they get that filing of offer of amends, the court assesses damages and awards damages to the intended plaintiff. Another defense is the defense of, even though that defense is kind of remote, the defense of being an internet or secondary publisher. In other words, you want to claim that you are not the original publisher of the story, that you simply saw it somewhere on the internet and relayed it. Why I said it's a narrow defense is that in the law of torts, which covers defamation, when you republish defamatory information, you are regarded as being equally liable. So you have to always caution yourself as to the source of your information. Is it correct? Is it right? Will it pass the test of credibility? When you answer yes to all those questions, then you can republish what you see on the internet or what you saw somebody previously publish. Another defense is the defense of public records. In other words, when you put out information and public records justifies you putting that information out, that is a complete defense. For example, going back to the Governor Wike example, if you say Governor Wike stole 1 billion naira, and it was discovered that after the Rivers State House of Assembly approved a budget for the state, they also approved certain supplemental amounts to the tune of 7 billion. And then when they go and check, they discover that of the supplemental amount, only 6 billion is remaining on the records. The Accountant General provides the documentation for you to see that out of 7 billion, 6 billion is remaining. That is a public record. And that you can use for your defense to say, look, here, I got this from the Accountant General's office. It shows that even though 7 billion was released, only 6 billion is left. And this money was handed over to Governor Wike. Where is the 1 billion? It justifies my putting out that information that 1 billion is stolen. A last defense, which is a defense which some of you here who are married will know, is a statement published in the heat of argument. Those of us that are married have argued with our spouses. They've argued with even our family members. There's some words you say when you are hot, when you are very angry, that you won't say when you are cool, calm, and collected. All of us are guilty of that. When we've been very upset, we've said things we didn't mean to say, or we ordinarily will not say. The law recognizes that people react differently when they are heated up or very angry. They lose control of both their temperament and their reason. So that defense is there. You could put up that defense and say, you know what? I may have said it, my Lord, but I said it in the heat of passion, in the heat of argument. I am sorry, but that is exactly why it came out that way. I did not intend to defame or damage the plaintiff. Now, sometimes the court steps in to prevent defamation. And in doing that, the court tends to grant what we call injunctive reliefs. An injunctive relief will forbid or ban somebody from putting out an offending publication or information. For example, let's see, if there's this Supreme Court case, it's actually one of the most famous defamation cases in Nigeria. It's Alhaji Femi Okunu versus, you all know him, Professor Wale Soyinka. As a background, Alhaji Femi Okunu was a federal commissioner under the administration of General Yakubu Gowon. Then federal ministers were known as federal commissioners. And Professor Wale Soyinka, in his popular book, The Man Died, had written, even though it was like a satire, he had written certain things about a certain journalist that worked then for the Nigerian Tribune that had written something negative about Alhaji Femi Okunu, and one thing led to the other, and the journalist, I think he was attacked by military or police personnel. The next thing, they had to take him abroad for treatment. They even had to amputate his legs. The long and short of it was, after all his tribulations, by the time he returned home to Nigeria, he died 6 weeks after. So Wale Soyinka wrote that novel, The Man Died. And the court, upon the application of Alhaji Femi Okunu, had agreed that the book itself was defamatory of Alhaji Femi Okunu, because any person that followed societal developments will know that that book was about him and what had happened to that journalist. So the court had banned the sale and publication of The Man Died. But then injunctive relief sometimes are ineffective, because it turned out that The Man Died, the novel had already been in wide circulation. So by the time the court had finished a couple of adjournments and gave the injunctive relief, it almost was a non-event, because it did not control the circulation of that book anymore. In fact, I still have a copy of the book that I in my library, and I know I bought it after the court had given that injunctive relief. So the damage defamation causes cannot be controlled even by the courts, because it goes beyond mere words. In defamation, once the word goes out there, it is damaging, it's almost permanent. So what the court tends to do is, the court awards general, exemplary, or aggravated damages after they find any journalist or any person out there liable. Now, general damages are the usual damages awarded by court after the court assesses the injury to the plaintiff. Exemplary damages are usually awarded to cannot teach the defendant a lesson to show that you shouldn't be putting out this kind of information so as not to damage somebody to this extent. So the court could award, let's say, 100,000 naira general damages, but then go further to award 250,000 naira exemplary damages to sanction that erring individual and prevent a reoccurrence in the future. As a matter of fact, where a plaintiff proves special damages, let's say the plaintiff goes to court and says, look, because of this story, Governor Wike could go to court and say, because of this 1 billion that they said I stole, my wife has refused to talk to me or cook for me. My family members have refused to talk to me anymore. Everybody have now turned their back against me. I wake up in the middle of the night worrying as to how I will face even my own employees. That's aggravated damages because it's got to a point where it's affecting the person's mental health or general disposition. So the court will award even aggravated damages, but that's usually in extreme cases. I will just want to point out that it's important for us as citizens and as individuals to be careful as to what we put out there, especially in this day and age of the internet. The internet never forgets. When you put out something on the internet, it stays out there forever. So it's always good to think twice before you put something out because it is considered libel since it's in permanent form. It's important to, watch what you say so as not to slander somebody and be subject to, a defamation lawsuit because of saying something out of turn. As a matter of fact, there was even a recent development in my Akwa Ibom state where I hail from. In November 2020, a popular sports journalist on XL 106.9 FM, Uyo, his name is Kufre Kata. He had, that was during the pandemic era. He had gone on his radio station and said that the State Commissioner for Health had mismanaged some palliatives and some amounts that was given by the federal government and by the World Health Organization for the management of COVID. Now, the Commissioner for Health, Dr. Dominic Ukbong, was very upset. He alleged that he was castigated, and he had the State Attorney General get Mr. Carter arrested. Mr. Carter was taken to the SSS facility and detained there, and for about a month, he was there. But finally, the chief magistrate got his case and they called it up. The government did not show up. They did not present any evidence, and he was discharged and released. But that shows how delicate our situation is in Nigeria, because unlike in the Western world, like in the US or Britain or Australia, where the laws are fastidiously followed, and defamation is a civil crime where an individual sues another individual, the Nigerian context actually allows powerful persons and government officials to get to the point of arresting you as a journalist. And because you or even your organization may not have the resources or the strength or power to fight those powerful individuals or the government, you may suffer for it, at least until reprieve comes. We know that there are laws that prevent this, and that we have defamation laws that also allow for certain defenses that are pointed out. We as a people must always ensure that we are cautious as to what we put out there. But all in all, no matter what the situation is, as a journalist and as a citizen, you are protected by the Nigerian Constitution, which under Section 39, subsection 1 provides for free speech, in that every person shall be entitled to freedom of expression. including the freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information without interference. So, do not allow defamation to scare you from your job as a journalist. Go in and do your work fearlessly. We have had legendary journalists in our time in Nigeria, people like the late Dele Giwa, people like Ray Ekbu of the Newswatch fame, and so many others who have bravely reported and informed the people and have allowed for change to occur in our society. Today, Nigeria needs bold and courageous journalists because of how our society has evolved to where it is now. Truth is a defense that any good journalist will always stand by. And when you make sure your sources are credible, you make sure your background is clear, you make sure that you are approaching the job with good conscience and without malice, you will all be successful. And on that note, I want to thank Ogasami. I want to thank God. I want to thank all those who put this platform together for this opportunity for me to speak with each and every one of you. Thank you so much. And please, if anybody has any questions or follow-up, I'm here. So feel free. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, sir. Your lecture is a stellar. We are so grateful, sir. So at this moment, we'd like to entertain questions. If you know you have questions, please, you can signify by putting up your hands, the icon, using the icon, so that I can call you. So if you have question, please, you can signify. So I'm only seeing McDonald somewhere. Only is the only person I've seen. I will call you McDonald. You can mute your mic for now. You can mute your mic. Okay, for now we have only McDonald somewhere, but I believe as we continue, other questions will come. So I want to start from Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
I'm hearing you. I didn't hear the question.
Okay, let me repeat myself. I said, what strategies can be taken by media houses to curb defamation from their journalists?
Yes, a first step is to set up what I will call an in-house verification process where the journalist does not just sit down in his house and put something out there. There has to be a process where it is channeled through either a person or a small committee before it is published to vet and approve what is going out there on behalf of the organization. Now, it is not to be regarded as censorship, because some people might argue that that's censorship. You are censoring what the individual is writing, but it is to protect both the individual and the organization, because guess what? If the individual, say, is working for Vanguard and he publishes defamatory material, both him and Vanguard will be sued for libel. So the organization can protect itself by setting up a vetting or verification process where it could not be anything formal, maybe run it through a veteran journalist, if it's a young or new journalist, and say, okay, here, look through this for me and make sure that everything is okay. And then when you get the okay, you can proceed to publish it.
Okay, sir.
That's one way. That's one way, I think. But I think it all starts with the individual. If you self-censor yourself, you may not even need to go through any other process. The responsibility starts with the individual journalist. Hello?
Okay,
Can
should
you
I
hear
go
me,
ahead with
sir?
my question?
No. I will call you. I will call you. Just a follow-up question, sir. I
Yes.
said, how do they fish out agents of defamation? Is there a committee in the media space that fish out these agents of defamation?
When you say agents of defamation, what do you mean by agents of defamation?
As in persons that go into the media space and just bring out false news about, it can be about a celebrity, it can be about a politician, as the case may be. So how do they fish out these people?
No, I mean, it's pretty obvious how it happens. Usually there is damage to somebody's reputation, and that person now reacts by reaching out to whoever published it and getting that person uh, sued, or in the Nigerian context, arrested. For example, if you know the information is not correct, and you write that the popular musician Tubaba impregnated a lady in Port Harcourt. Already the man has problems with having several children from several women. And you want to add to his problem by publishing false information. Of course, Tubaba will react by getting a lawyer to file a defamation suit against whoever wrote it.
Okay, sir. Thank you so very much, sir. Mr. McDonald Samuel, please, let's hear from you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I want to ask a question based on what you said. A good journalist needs to preserve his right sources. Now,
Yes.
what if court demands desperately that it should be made public for the hearers? And you know why a journalist need to preserve it. So what if court demands such?
Well, the way the courts work when it comes to defamation issues, especially against journalists, it's different from the regular individual. That's why, if you remember, I mentioned a defense. It's called qualified privilege. Journalists all over the world have that defense, where because of your responsibility as a journalist to inform and educate, and because of the right of the public to receive that information, you can keep your source secret. The court does not have any facility to compel you to reveal that source, because guess what? The court itself knows that you are protected by the Constitution. People don't understand how powerful that section of the Constitution is, where there is freedom of speech, section 39, subsection 1. It gives you the right to bear an opinion, protect that opinion, declare that opinion, so long as it is true. Now, you cannot be protected. You cannot protect a source where information is false. You have to understand there's a distinction. If it is correct, then the court will not compel you. The court will actually say you should adopt it as a defense. But where there are things or tendencies or circumstances to show that it is false, and the other side proves that it is false, then of course, you will be compelled to show that source.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yes.
All right. Do we still have any other question? If you have a question, can I see your hands up? Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm here. I'm still.
Blessing Chidera, I can see your hand up. Blessing Chidera, I can see your hands up. You can ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening, Blessing.
Hello. Okay. Please, I wanted to ask, why is the law of defamation important to the press?
Oh, yes. The law of defamation is actually central to journalism in general, because You see, there is a thin line between reporting information and defamation, in the sense that a journalist has a burden. The burden is, I must report information that the public needs to get. But on the flip side, you also realize that that information you are giving will have an effect on somebody or a group of persons. So you have to weigh carefully what you put out there. Most news and media organizations understand this. That is why they retain lawyers or law firms, so that in the event they get sued for libel or defamation, they can act to defend themselves. And of course, the courts also have those protections for journalists, because the press is regarded as the fourth estate of the realm. The first estate is the executive. The second estate is the legislature. The third estate is the judiciary. The fourth estate, which is not officially in government, is actually the press, because the press keeps a check and a balance on those three arms of government. Without the press, the public will be lost as to information about the activities of government, about the activities of the legislature, about the activities of the judiciary. And then the press acts as a check so that they don't run riot with the activities of people and what is pertained.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for your explanation. Mr. Frank, I can see your hands up. You can ask your question.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So my question goes this way. What happens if a party call for defamation and upon findings, we later discover that the news was actually true? What is the position of the law in such circumstances?
Then that journalist stands on firm and good ground. Realize that the most complete defense to defamation is justification or truth. So where the plaintiff brings a case against the journalist or the journalist's establishment, and the journalist actually has facts to show that that information is correct, like I illustrated with Governor Wike and the imaginary 1 billion naira that was stolen. If the journalist has facts from the Office of the Accountant General that 1 billion naira was missing, and that prior to the 1 billion naira being missing, the money, 7 billion, was handed over to Governor Wike, and today we have 6 billion declared. The presumption is that the money was in Governor Wike's custody, and Wike took it. So because you have that documentation from the Office of the Accountant General, it is not a rumor, it is fact. You are basing it on important financial information that you have, that you also will file in court. So that forms a complete defense to you. And the burden of proof or persuasion now moves on to Governor Wike. Governor Wike now has to bring any other information that will show that, one, he does not have the 1 billion naira, and two, that the information is incorrect. So at that point, you, the journalist, do not become liable anymore.
Sir, just to follow up, would there be any damages? Would there be any award to the person, to the journalist, like a damage after all these findings that the whole story was true?
Oh, yes. Definitely. Just like a plaintiff usually gets damages if a defendant is found liable, the court also awards damages against a plaintiff where they find that the plaintiff's filing or allegation is incorrect. So apart from to award general damages to you, the journalist, the court will also award court costs and attorney or lawyer's costs. So whatever you paid your lawyer, whatever you paid to defend yourself in court will be given to you by the court, will be awarded to you by the court.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Are there any questions? Is there anybody that have a question to ask? You can do so now. Let me see your hands. Okay, my cookie, I can see your hands up. You can have the floor.
All right, thank you so much. Good evening, sir. Thank you for
good evening,
thank you for an amazing lecture. We've gleaned so much from your experience. So I just want to have some clarification. So you said the press is the fourth estate of the realm, which absolutely is, yeah. And by that, I want to believe that there will be some constitutional protection around journalists and pressmen in course of carrying out their duties. But we've seen cases where journalists, they have the facts, they have information that they want to share to the public, but they are not willing to do so because of either the fear of attack on their safety and their lives. And just the instance that you cited in, I think, Akwa Ibom State, where a journalist will go out and give an information, and we see that they are being arrested, and they are being detained, and in most cases, the law is silent about them. So how do a journalist go about carrying out his duty within the ambit of the Constitution?
Thank you for that excellent question. And actually, that is the dilemma that we are facing in Nigeria, in the sense that even though Section 39 of the Constitution allows for freedom of speech, and even though the journalist has qualified privilege, in reality, we understand we still live in, forgive me for saying this, in a jungle, in the sense that sometimes people in position of authority abuse their power. Now, why I brought up the case of the journalist in Akwa Ibom is that all hope is not lost. We still have men and women in the judiciary who stand up for the rights of the individuals and the rights of the journalists. That chief magistrate was very brave and bold, and she was female. Our women are strong. So even though the Attorney General and the Commissioner for Health, and I will say the governor, were on the other side, she was bold enough to say, you know what, we don't have any evidence of this against this gentleman. And she, discharged him and released him. It all depends on how the law and the administration of the law develops. It is important for the Nigerian Union of Journalists to continue advocating for a stronger administration of justice in terms of how the law of defamation is applied to journalists and how journalists are treated with respect. You don't shove journalists about, you don't whip them with koboko like military or police personnel do. You respect them because of what they stand for and who they are. I mean, we all know that saying, and it is true. The pen is mightier than the sword. So what the journalist can write moves more weight than how many bullets a policeman can shoot in the air. So it is important that the Nigerian Union of Journalists strategize to make sure that they reach out both to the various House of Assemblies and even through the Minister of Information, to continue to ascertain that, look, journalists should be treated with respect should not be harmed, should be protected. Actually, there should have been a special provision in the Electoral Act, for example, in the forthcoming elections for protection for journalists, so that they are not hindered in any way from reporting electoral activities, and they are protected from various dangers associated with the elections that we know occur in Nigeria.
Right. Thank you so very much, sir. An excellent response.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Frank,
Okay.
I'm seeing your hand. So do you want to ask question?
No.
Okay.
I'm done.
All right, sir. So before we call it a wrap up, there is a statement my fellow colleague made, which I don't have any idea about. So I would want you to do explanation on that. The statement said, the press is the fourth estate of the realm. I don't understand that totally, please. I want you to do a proper explanation on that, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Like I pointed out earlier, the realm, REALM, signifies authority over the people. Now, authority over the people is usually conferred on powerful institutions of state. We all know that government is divided into the executive arm, which is headed by President Buhari, the and the governors at the state level, the legislative arm, which is headed by Senator Lawan of the Senate, and Senator Gbajabiamila of the House of Reps, the Speaker of the House of Reps. And then we have the judiciary, which is headed by Justice Mohammed of the Supreme Court. And the state level also have the various speakers of the state House of Assemblies and the various state chief judges. So those are the three official realms of government. Because of the power of the press, because of the role the press plays in both reporting and informing the public, the press is unofficially regarded as an estate of the realm, and they're called the fourth estate. It's like in football, you have 11 players on the field, but then you also have the 12 players, which is the spectators or the supporters in the stands. They carry a lot of weight too. So it's always important to acknowledge those spectators or the press, because, for example, if you are playing, let's say, Shooting Stars is playing Rivers United in Port Harcourt. Rivers United will be at home. 90% of the crowd will be cheering for Rivers United, and they will have a moral and psychological advantage over Shooting Stars in the Port Harcourt Stadium, and they are likely to win. The press plays the same role for the Nigerian public. The press, being the fourth estate, represents the people even more than the people elected into the Senate or House of Reps or House of Assembly, because they are the people that relate what the man on the street says. They are the people that represent the feelings of the people. The pressmen live with the people and have the obligation to report, present, and educate information, and educating information to the people. So their role cannot in any way be undermined. That is why in the Western world, the press tends to be extremely powerful and influential. You have CNN, you have Fox News that have influence worldwide. All the guns that Putin has, for example, does not equate to what CNN or Fox News can put out there and influence perception and opinions. So that's why the press is the fourth estate of the realm.
All right. Thank you so much. We are really privileged to be under your lecture. So, sir, do you have any word of encouragement to us as the next media men and women? Thank you, sir.
Yes, I mean, like I said earlier, the ball is in your court. The baton has been handed over to you. and you owe a responsibility to yourself, to your community, to do justice to that responsibility as a journalist. Realize something. You, with your pen or your computer keyboard, you are more powerful than that politician sitting in the House of Assembly. You are more powerful than your local government chairman. You have the power to influence and influence massively. You have the power to educate and educate possibly, but you also have the responsibility to do it in truth, with wisdom, and with the need to ensure that Nigeria is a better place. As a journalist, you also have that forum to more or less advertise yourself. Because today, the best information out there is positive views or positive information. The first president of Nigeria, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, was a journalist. He was the author and publisher of the West African Pilot. It was that vehicle that he used to get into politics and become prominent. And since then, a lot of other politicians have realized the power of the press. That is why today, if you see many successful people in politics do not play with the press. As a matter of fact, one of the most powerful politicians in Nigeria today, Dr. Alhaji Ahmed Tinubu, like you know, has one of the biggest newspapers in Nigeria, one of the biggest television houses in the nation. And that has helped to propagate both his image and his philosophies. And there's so many others that I can go on and on about, like Dr. Ojus or Kalu and several others. In fact, we remember Chief MKO Abiola, who also owned the Concord newspapers. So it tells you the power of the press. Even the high and mighty make sure that they have the press on their side. Or in the case of these people I mentioned, try to own a part of it. So please do not in any way lower yourselves in the esteem of the society. Make sure that you stand up for what is right and always do good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It was a great privilege having you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us here. All right, guys. As we know, our norm, you go to the and post what you've learned for today. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll be bringing the meeting to a close. Bye, sir. Thank you so much,
Thank you. Bye. Yeah, thank you.
All right. All right, guys. We'll see you over in the group. Bye.